Hello, I'm Jim Munich. We've got a great program for you today. It's all about self-reliance in the wilderness. Our expert, Mountain Mel, has 20 years experience teaching survival to military personnel.
Hello, I'm Mel DeWeese. In the next hour or so, I'm going to teach you wilderness survival skills. The first aspect will be mental preparedness. You know you're mentally prepared when you have the tools and the skills to meet your needs in an emergency. Your survival plan has 6 skill areas: fire starting, water procurement, shelter building, signaling, food foraging, and first aid.
Survival plan skills provide you with the weapons to overcome the 7 enemies that threaten your life. The 7 enemies are fear and anxiety, cold and heat, thirst, boredom and loneliness, fatigue, hunger, pain and injury.
The survival plan priorities are different in different environments. For example, in a dry desert environment, starting a fire may not be your first priority in your survival plan, but seeking or making shelter is. Making a shelter helps defeat the enemy of cold and heat.
In a different situation, you may be injured or bleeding. Treating the injury, stopping the bleeding, is step 1. This initial step in your survival plan defeats the life-threatening enemy, pain and injury.
If you're cold and wet, fire is your first priority in your survival plan. Cold and heat are the enemies, and the weapon to defeat them is fire. Okay, let's discover more survival plan skills that you'll need to defeat the 7 enemies.
While I relax here in this wilderness hot tub, Mel will show you how to defeat several of the enemies with a survival kit.
First, you want to develop the skills to use the tools in your survival kit. The more skills you have, the more survival weapons you can direct at your 7 enemies. The enemies, fear and anxiety, disappear with the self-confidence that you have the kit and have mastered the skills to survive any situation.
Here's some kits that you can use in special situations. You can buy these over the counter. This larger kit, available from Emergency Essentials, is designed for car, boat, or small airplane. There's water for drinking, cooking, and cleaning wounds, a high-calorie energy bar to take the edge off hunger and lift the spirits, a chemical warmer to fend off frostbite, waterproof matches, and light sticks, a 100-hour candle with fuel for emergency fire starting, also a rain poncho, first aid kit, and space blanket that can provide shelter and be used for signaling. This storm kit, if you had to bivouac overnight, comes in a waterproof can with a bivouac sack, a tent that you can put up, a candle, some tea, matches, a bouillon cube, and some sugar. The kit also comes with instructions on how to use it and this whistle.
The best survival kit is the one that you make yourself. It's compact, it's complete, and it has all the tools to defeat the 7 enemies.
Each tool in the kit should have more than one use. Let's take a look at Mel's personal survival kit. Plant ID cards, 2 wire snares, 3 illustrations of traps, 2 bouillon cubes, food to lift the spirits, 2 pieces of candy, another good mood elevator, fire starting tools including a magnifying glass, matches, and an emery cloth for striking matches. Wax paper, a candle, 3 fire fuel cubes, cotton ball for fire fuel, a bow and drill how-to illustration, magnesium match fire starter, signaling equipment including a whistle and a mirror, a few first aid items, aspirin, needle, band-aids, tools used for building shelter, procuring water, and finding your way, a razor blade for cutting in place of a knife, a rubber band for weapon and tool making, multi-bladed knife, 50 feet of dental floss for fishing, tying, etc., compass for direction and navigation, broadhead for tool cutting or making an arrow, foil for signaling or cooking, file for sharpening knife and shaping tools, paper and pencil for writing notes, what time you went out, where you are headed. The paper can also be used as a fire starter, fishing hooks, a rubber worm, and lead sinker. Also a Ziploc bag and this watertight container containing water purification tablets.
One basic rule on survival kits, if you don't have it with you when you need it, you may never need it again. When you go camping or hiking, always carry your kit and practice using the tools. Make every experience a survival experience. Size up the place and say to yourself, what would I do if I was lost here? What materials and what skills could I use in this area? Here's a tip. Make 2 survival kits, one for practice and one for the real trip. With the kit, you can conquer fear and anxiety. You now have all the tools to continue your attack on the 7 enemies. Your first enemy, if you're not injured, is cold and heat. To conquer cold and heat, you must build a fire and make or seek shelter. Your survival kit has the basic elements for starting a fire: magnesium match and tinder. Tinder is a highly flammable substance. It may be natural or synthetic. Natural tinders include cattails, scrapes of vine, small dried twigs, leaves, birch bark, pine needles, pine bark, cedar bark, or cottonwood bark. And for example, a bird's nest contains all these materials. When dry, these are highly flammable materials. Other fuels you can pack with you include Vaseline, candle, wax paper, popsicle sticks, etc.
There are numerous ways to start a fire without a match. Handle flares carefully. They provide immense heat under the wettest conditions. This piezo wrist lighter provides a time, date, and fire to go. A short-circuited 9-volt battery provides a life-saving spark. A flashlight reflector pointed at the sun can kindle a flame. A magnifying glass can be focused to burn. The premier survival fire starter is the magnesium match. Potassium permanganate mixed with glycerin makes an explosive fire starter. Wear protective glasses and don't give up on this. Many a person has walked away from this chemical reaction only to have it burst into flames after they leave. A file or piece of iron, cotton char cloth, and flint can be combined to strike a spark. The charred cloth catches the spark. This old military igniter did not fire up. Periodically replace old and dated materials. Okay, let's take a look at two practical fire starters. First, the 9-volt battery, and then the magnesium match. A 9-volt battery provides lots of fire starting punch. The fuse is finishing grade steel wool. Secure the two lengths of steel wool to opposite poles of the battery. Touch the ends of the steel wool leads to short circuit a spark. Gently squeeze in the bird's nest fire bundle while softly blowing air into the sparking fuel. It's been raining all day. All the exposed wood is wet. I'm going to try to start a fire with a magnesium match. I'm going to walk you through the steps. I'm in a little shelter here to protect me from the wind and elements. It's a big fir tree. There's a lot of dry tinder under here, so let's get started. Spruce, fir, and pine wood are very flammable. The thick needle canopy provides protection from wind and rain and keeps twigs and dead needles dry. Make 3 piles of fuel: dry needles, pencil-thin twigs, and larger fuel. In wet conditions, a stick bridge of wood keeps tinder dry and provides more ventilation. The fire bundle is tissue smeared with Vaseline. Vaseline is fuel and grabs and holds stray magnesium files. Scrape magnesium filings onto the tissue. Then arrange a pile of filings in a pit of the tissue. Get a good grip on the magnesium match. Strike the magnesium briskly with the striker. Protect the fuel bundle with your hands. Nestle some twigs around it to keep it in place. Add dry pine needles. Blow air into the embers to increase oxygen. Now add pencil-thin twigs. Then box in the fire with larger wood, like building a log cabin. Keep fueling until the fire is safe and strong. The magnesium match is a versatile, easy-to-use fire starter in all weather conditions. Native Americans and indigenous people worldwide have primitive fire starting tools. Let's watch Mel demonstrate some of this primitive technology. With his critics looking on, let's watch Mel demonstrate primitive fire tools. First, the bow and drill. Mel describes the critical elements.
A tough bowstring. I find a curved bow gives me more control of the spindle. The fireboard is made from cottonwood or yucca. There's a notch for the spindle and a tray to catch the hot ember. The hand socket, made of rock or hardwood, is used to hold and apply pressure to the spindle. And of course, the fire nest is made of flammable materials. To begin, twist in the spindle with the string looped away from the bow. This fireboard has several notches. I can start 4 or 5 fires from each notch. The green leaf tray is used to catch the hot ember. Insert the spindle into the notch. You may lubricate the socket with wax, grease, oil, or the like. Begin sawing with the bow. Make certain the wrist of the socket hand is stabilized against the leg. Lock it in tight to steady the spindle while applying downward force. A few seconds after you see smoke, the notch will fill with a hot black powder. The powder ignites, forming the ember. Use the tray to catch the ember and transfer it to the fire nest. This looks pretty easy. Practice, persistence, perseverance, and prayer will pay off. Native Americans also use pump drills to start fires. My favorite spindle head is yucca secured by sinew to the shaft of the pump drill. The shaft goes through the center of a hardwood balance wheel. Coil the handbar around the shaft and begin pumping with a firm downward thrust. Relax pressure so the cord can recoil, then stroke downward again. The tray catches the ember. Native American hand drills require the most skill and technique. The drills, called Indian matches, are twirled into a fireboard. The match spindles are made of cedar, mullein, willow, teasel, and yucca. Fireboards can be yucca, cottonwood, or cedar.
In this demonstration, Mel uses thumb loops on a hand drill.
There are 2 advantages to thumb loops. 1, I don't have to move my hands up and down the drill, and 2, I can keep constant downward pressure in the notch of the fireboard. Samoan Islanders used a fire plow to start fires. Polynesians made the plow of balsa. I've successfully used yucca and cottonwood. The groove board is of the same materials. The Negrito Aborigines of the Philippines used this bamboo fire saw to fire up a suckling pig. Even in damp environments, this is a highly successful tool. If you have access to bamboo, this tool is simply made. The bamboo saw has a hard, sharp edge. The tinder made of bamboo shavings is placed into the fire tray. The tray has this guiding notch, also an ember poker, and a tinder securing bridge. Tinder is scraped from the backside of the saw. The tinder holding groove is cut into the hollow of the fire tray. The groove thins the thickness of the tray. A guiding notch is cut on the opposite side of the fire tray. Use the ember poker to punch a hole through the notch. Use the bridge to hold 2 balls of tinder side by side to catch the hot embers formed by the sawing action. The Solpak fire piston from the Philippines works like a diesel engine. The piston compresses air and tinder to the ignition point. The The cylinder is made of water buffalo horn or hard wood. The piston is of like material. It has a hollowed end to hold the tinder bundle. The tinder is the inner fuzz of the bark on the palm tree. I use thread to make a gasket around the piston. The ignition action is one continuous movement. To make notches in a fireboard or for drilling holes, I use a pump drill. The cedar shaft has a lava rock balance wheel. The notching point is knapped flint or chert. The handbar is strung to the top of the shaft with a piece of rawhide.
To protect yourself from heat, cold, wind, snow, rain, and hail, you need shelter. In an emergency, the quickest ready-made shelters are provided by Mother Nature, or you can make them from Mother Nature's gifts.
Go get him. Go up there and get him. Go get him, sir. Go check. Check it out. Go get him over there. Yeah. Is it in there? Come get it. Come get him. Come get him. Come get him. Come get him.
Caves and crevices are excellent natural shelters and were used by Native Americans both as homes and temporary lodging. Ducking under the boughs of a mature pine tree provides good shelter for an emergency bivouac. Here are some emergency shelters from natural materials. When shelter building, the inner bark of cottonwood provides a floor, ample protection from the dampness of the earth. The tough outer bark of the cottonwood makes a weatherproof cover. Here, Mel uses inner bark of cottonwood to fasten pine poles into a lean-to. The pole frame is thatched with juniper, cedar, and pine boughs. Pinyon pine trees on each side support the lean-to frame. A piece of cord from your survival kit can be tied off to a tree to support a space blanket. An adequate shelter for both man and beast.
Yeah, boy, that's a good dog. Yeah, we can survive, can't we? We're going to have dog meat for supper.
Space blankets provide shelter in both hot and cold environments. A space blanket is a fundamental, must-have survival tool.
In a desert environment, seek shade. Use clothing, your bandana, or debris to build a shelter. Have the opening of the shelter face north away from the sun. Making the shelter above or below the ground will keep temperatures down by 10 degrees.
When hiking, make a habit of looking for shelters nature provides. These mental notes may someday save your life. But be aware, some shelters are not safe. You certainly wouldn't want to be here the night the roof collapses or a flash flood comes roaring through. Well, I'm in pretty good shape. I've got a survival kit, fire, and this shelter. Now it's time to let rescuers know where I am. Loneliness and boredom can be quieted by actively seeking rescue. Rescue teams are in the field and in the air looking for you. How can you attract their attention? Signaling equipment comes in all shapes, sizes, and technology. Whistles, flare guns, colorful kites and flags. There are strobe flashes, louvered signal mirrors, sky blazer flares, smoke, and high-pressure air horns. We tested several signaling tools at Mountain Mel's Survival Training Camp in Unaweep Canyon, Colorado. Mel used smoke, flags and flag waving, a reflective space blanket, whistling and horn blowing, and a signal mirror. With the canyon walls a backdrop, the smoke was difficult to see from a half-mile away. Likewise for the various colored flags and the waving space blanket. Movement made flags and blankets more visible, yet at a distance the improvement wasn't that great. Whistles and horns carry well in canyons when there is no wind howling through them, but it's difficult to tell which direction the sound is coming from. The mirror proved to be the most effective tool for signaling. Even at a half mile, it was a brilliant attention getter. Under perfect conditions, a flashing mirror can be seen for over 50 miles. Here Mel aims the reflection from the mirror by sighting through a hole. A mirror without a sighting hole can be aimed through 2 fingers held like a gun sight. My buddy Graham here knows that large man-made triangles, circles, and squares stand out from the natural environment. They provide positive proof to rescue aircraft that a human below needs help. A fire is one of the best night signals. A fire on a hill can be seen for miles. A smoking fire can be seen better during the daytime than flames. Come here. Whether in a cold or hot environment, an ample supply of water defeats the enemy, thirst. Our water expert is Chris Clark of Emergency Essentials in Orem, Utah.
Well, we're here to talk about water. Water is probably one of the most important things that you could have in the event of an emergency in the wilderness or even at your home. Everybody needs to have at least a gallon of water stored per day for about a 2-week period of time. We have a lot of government studies and a lot of church studies that say that you ought to have at least a 2-week supply. During an emergency, a lot of times it takes several days for the rescue crews to get in place and provide emergency drinking water. So it's a really good idea to have some stored. We'll talk about a couple different ways to store it, and then in case that storage gets contaminated some way, a couple of ways to pull water right out of a stream like this and have some drinking water that's safe to drink. As far as storing water, you want to have a good, reliable container that's food grade. One of the best is the Mylar storage bags. They hold 5 gallons of water. You have to rotate the water about once a year because water starts to go flat as it stores and it doesn't taste quite as good. But if you pour the water out about once a year, refill it right from your tap, you should have a good, safe, reliable source of drinking water. These little packets are another source of good water. They're originally developed for the lifeboats, life rafts, and these water pouches will store water for about 5 years before you have to rotate it. One of the things I want to cover, just a couple of products here. The first would be this, it's a new chlorine filtration or purification tablet, a chlorine purification tablet that kills 99% of any bacteria or viruses or anything that you're going to be concerned about in the wild. That's AQUACURE Tablets. They have about a 2-year shelf life, so you want to rotate them on a regular basis. The second product I want to cover is the Katadyn water filter. It's good up to about 2,000 gallons. So for long-term purification needs, if you're going to be in a situation where you can't get back to civilization and can't get back to where you can replace filters, then the Katadyn would be the way to go. If not that, then you could go with a pure, either a Scout or an Explorer, and both of those filters will give you pretty much 100% kill. You don't have to worry about any water that you drink from those two systems. You still have to make sure that you wash your hands using purified water instead of stream water, or make sure that when you bring soda pop cans or anything out of the water that you clean them off with purified water so that you don't get some of those bacteria that are in there.
You can make water safe to drink by simply bringing it to a boil. This will kill most waterborne pathogens. But what if you are lost without water? How long can you survive? In moderate temperatures between 50 and 75 degrees, an inactive person can survive without water for up to 10 days. But when temperatures rise above 115 degrees Fahrenheit, maximum survival time without water may only be 2 days. Next, Dr. William Forgy is going to share with you some basic wilderness first aid skills.
In a survival situation, maintaining an adequate shelter and water supply could be your most important near-term objectives. But what if you're injured? What could go wrong in the wilderness? How would you handle that? Well, there's several types of injuries you could run into. One might be an orthopedic or a soft tissue injury, say a broken bone, a sprain, or a cut. Another type of problem you could run into would be infection. This might be a bad cold, diarrhea, or a wound infection. And another thing to worry about are those environmental injuries. Too much heat, too much cold, high altitude, or even lightning, injuries of that nature. What's our approach to the wound going to be? How are we going to handle it when we don't have a first aid kit? We have virtually no supplies. Is there an approach? Well, yes, there is. What we want to try to do is minimize the pain and the trauma, keep the person as functional as possible, and buy time until we can get out and get official repair. You know, that official repair can often be delayed quite some time. For example, in a broken bone, you really don't need to have an orthopedic surgeon see it and do any type of surgery for many days, actually for several weeks. A cut tendon can go for weeks before it needs to be repaired. We'd like to repair it as soon as possible because it starts mushing up. It starts losing its strength. So we'd love to repair those within 10 days if possible. If not, and a long time goes by, a tendon graft can be done. So while it seems a horrible thing to experience in the great outdoors, it can be successfully handled later if we take proper care of it initially. What is that proper care? Well, the standard first aid care for a wound is to stop the bleeding and treat for shock. And that saves the person's life. We keep the blood from spewing out, and we treat them for shock by laying them down, elevating their arms and legs. That allows what blood that's in their body to rush up to their head and keep that brain going. That's the most important part of, well, most of us anyway. After you've done that, you would normally take the person to the doctor and have that wound taken care of. But if you're out by yourself, what are you going to do? The best thing next would be to irrigate or clean that wound. Irrigation is best done with high velocity of water going in it. You may not have some syringe or a method of pumping water, but what you'll want to do is obtain the cleanest water possible. If possible, you'd want to boil water for maybe up to 10 minutes, nothing longer. That'd make it sterile. Even a 1-minute boil would probably be quite adequate. Then after it cools, if you might have by any chance a plastic bag, you could pour the water in the bag and poke a little hole in it and then squeeze on that bag, and that would jet water into the wound, because we need to get all the debris out of that wound. When you apply direct pressure, you might have to hold it there to stop the bleeding 5 minutes or half an hour, whatever it takes. Once you jet water in there to clean it out, and you might want to rub it off with a little piece of clean cloth, that will cause it to bleed again. You again have to apply direct pressure. But the important thing is we've irrigated out the germs that may have been forced into that wound when the accident first happened. Then we again hold it shut until it stops bleeding. Now, obviously we would prefer a physician to close this wound, but it's not always necessary to even close a wound. Sometimes I'll just flop together with the direct pressure, and a little piece of tape across it will be all that's needed. So in the survival situation, you may be able to accomplish that real well. If it remains gaping open, say a cut over the elbow or the knee, try to position your elbow, if there's a cut here that opens up when you bend your elbow, hold it so it doesn't do that. You might even have to splint it so that your elbow won't move, and allows that wound to flop close. That may be all you need for it. Otherwise, tape or splinting may do a great job in holding that wound closed. In the wilderness, we would normally not try to close a wound unless we knew that the patient was going to be out there for over 2 days. And that's because when you do stitch or tape a wound shut, you increase the chance for infection. You sprain your right ankle or knee, carry the cane in your left hand, and as you move your right leg forward, go forward with that left hand holding the cane and support it that way, not along the same side. That puts a more natural straight up and down force vector across the wounded part. Orthopedic injuries can be very painful, and if you have no pain medication, it may be that providing cold to the wound site is the best thing that you can do. This sometimes can be done simply by evaporating water. If you have that t-shirt wrapped around the wound and you put water on it, its evaporation will help cool that wound somewhat. Of course, if you have a cool stream nearby, you can add cold water to even work better. And if there's a snowfield nearby, you may be able to actually apply that ice part of rest, ice, compress, and elevation. But we don't want the patient to become hypothermic or too cold. When it comes to infections in the outdoors, the most common one will be diarrhea. And that's easy to acquire from either contaminated water supply or contaminated food supply. In case of diarrhea, the only thing you may be able to do is try to maintain hydration. That means drink adequate water to replace those diarrhea losses. The worst thing that can happen is that you become dehydrated, dried out too much. Try to get water as clean as possible. The ideal thing would be to bring it to a boil. For drinking, water does not need to be boiled, just brought to the boiling point, and that'll kill any germ that might harm your intestine system. And drink down at least as much as you're losing through perspiration, breathing loss, or diarrhea losses and urinating losses. You cannot drink too much water in a survival situation. Drinking water also protects you from injuries of cold stress and heat stress. Now, it's apparent when it's very hot out, you might need more water. What people don't realize, though, is when it's very cold out, you need more water. Hydration is very important. You can go without food for many days, but water is an important thing to provide in adequate quantities if you can find it. Infectious disease is also going to attack the respiratory system, the ear may hurt. There's a variety of things that may occur in the outdoors. Generally, the only thing you can do for that patient is to, again, hydrate them. Obviously, if we had medications along, we might be able to treat them more specifically. But for that, you might need to have a more clear diagnosis of to what you're treating. For that reason, books have been written which look into the diagnosis and treatment and extended care trips, expeditions, or under the survival conditions.
In the resource section at the end of this program, we will show you where to get Dr. Forgey's wilderness medicine and first aid books. Now let's rediscover some Native American wisdom and how they used wild plants for survival, First aid. Prickly pear cactus, Opuntia, was used by Native Americans for treating wounds, spider bites, snake bites, and insect bites. Slice the cactus and apply it to the wound or sting. Bloodroot, Sanguinaria canadensis, was pounded into water and a wash applied to repel mosquitoes. We're going to do a little experiment here with some bloodroot and just see how well it works against mosquitoes. My left arm was left untreated, and immediately mosquitoes began to perch. 3 nasty bloodsuckers in 2 minutes. My bloodroot treated right arm did not interest the mosquitoes. There were no landings. Echinacea, the purple coneflower, root, and bloom are used to treat wounds, colds, flu, fungal infections, and snake bites. Pioneers and Native Americans put a wash of buttercups on their clothing to repel bears. And a wash of Asclepias tuberosa, butterfly weed root, was used to repel coyotes and wolves. Hickory catkins were infused into water, and then the wash was applied to sunburn to cool and soothe it. Jewelweed is rubbed onto the skin to both prevent and treat poison ivy. Blueberries may be eaten to treat diarrhea. Good morning. I spent a safe night here, tucked away with my juniper to protect me from rattlesnakes. Here in Michigan we have pygmy rattlers, Masasagi. Native Americans used Thuja occidentalis, arbor vitae, or sometimes called northern white cedar, to repel snakes. It works just like the juniper. You may want to stick some in your boots. These and hundreds of other remedies are described in detail in our 3 natural health videos: Native American medicine, Little Medicine, the wisdom to avoid big medicine, and natural health with medicinal herbs and healing foods. Many plants produce a witch's brew of dangerous chemicals. Here are a few poisonous berries you should learn to identify and avoid. Poison hemlock with its purple spotted stem. Holly with its evergreen leaves. And the grape-like moonseed with the crescent moon. Bittersweet or poisonous nightshade is a climbing vine with unique leaves. And poison ivy, a clinging vine with 3 leaves and berries. This is poison sumac. And here's poisonous pokeweed. This is poisonous red osier. And the toxic berry of horse nettle. And here's false Solomon seal berries. To learn more about these poisonous plants and many others, read the AMA's Handbook of Poisonous and Injurious Plants by Lamp and McCann. Now Mel will demonstrate some primitive traps and tools to defeat the enemy, hunger. Digging sticks can be sharpened, then hardened by pushing the point into hot coals. The stick is made from hickory, Osage orange, oak, and other hardwoods. A small tree with a fork in it can be cut into an effective hunting tool. The Negrito band spear is a very efficient tool utilizing a pointed stick and rubber band. To nap or flake a cutting edge from stone, first rub the stone to form a platform, then strike sharply with a softer stone or piece of antler. An obsidian flake is razor sharp. Native Americans crafted a wide variety of stone, bone, and antler points. Here's an obsidian knife with an antler handle. Fishhooks and points were often made from flint and quartz. Here's a Missouri flint axe head. Points are lashed to shafts with wet sinew that shrinks and is sealed with a mixture of ashes and pine rosin. Arrow fletchings are made from rabbit fur or feathers. This arrow shaft is hollow and may be fitted with multiple points. Mel's bow is made from Osage orange. Guess what this is? It's weighted to provide extra thrust. Leather cordage provides an excellent hand grip. The point and shaft is notched. And the addle is launched. Here's an Apache foot snare. A Philippine hand basket plunge trap is used to catch fish, frogs, and crawdads. Throwing sticks have been around since humankind climbed down from the trees.
Here's an Ojibwe bird snare made of cordage and wood. Watch how it works. A figure 4 box trap is used for small birds and rodents. The trigger has 3 pieces. The box is weighted to speed the falling action.
The figure 4 trigger device can support a deadfall.
The Philippine rodent trap is made of bamboo or any hollow log. The trigger is notched and the front door is a spoon, spring-loaded with a bow.
Let's see that again.
Drag snares are simple and effective, made from wire or cordage in your survival kit. Set it on an animal trail or runway.
Some of these traps are illegal in your state and can only be used in a survival scenario. Knowing a few edible wild plants can be life-saving knowledge. Edible wild plants are abundant and quick to harvest. In wetlands, young cattail shoots can be pulled out of the ground, then stripped of their tough outer sheath. Sauté, delicious. Cattail roots are rich in starch and edible. The starch dissolves readily into water. In June, cattail heads can be harvested and used with flour in pancakes, muffins, and cornbread. Watercress is easy to identify, abundant, and nutrient-rich. Wild leeks are delicious, nutrient-rich, and have health-protecting sulfur compounds. Blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, and other wild fruits, roots, and nuts are superior foods and generously abundant. We have produced 2 videos that identify over 175 edible wild plants. These tapes cover in detail identification characteristics, harvesting tips, cooking skills, and medicinal uses. Today, millions of people crowd the wilderness, but less than 1% ever leave the trail. Let's learn how to leave the trail and escape the crowds by navigating through the bush. Till recently, the compass was the state-of-the-art tool for staying found. One end of a sewing needle always points to magnetic north. But which end? The eye of this needle points to magnetic north. But over here, the needle's sharp end points to the magnetic pole. Make certain you check the magnetic direction of your sewing needle before you get lost. Finding your way in the wilderness or on water has been greatly improved with the Magellan GPS 2000. Magellan is an easy-to-use direction finder that reads satellite signals. Globally positioned satellites signal your exact location anywhere on the planet. Military proven, here is an all-weather, all-terrain, anywhere you travel tool that helps you stay found. Get wet in the wilderness and you might suffer from hypothermia. Here's a few tips to make sure you don't. Right here in my pack, I have a complete change of clothes in Ziploc bags. Sitting around in wet clothing on a windy, chilly day can be life-threatening. Keep your clothes dry. To prevent hypothermia when active, avoid excessive sweating by letting your body heat escape. Shed your jacket if you begin sweating. When your work is finished, remove wet clothes before resting. Put on dry clothes. If you do get wet and wet clothing cannot be replaced, cover it with a vapor barrier, a garbage bag, or a plastic rain suit. This blocks the chilling wind and prevents heat loss from evaporation. Get back to your shelter, build a fire, and get some dry clothes on. Well, if you've been keeping count, you know we've covered just 16 ways to start a fire without a match. For number 17, Mel has brought back this technique from Australia. Take a fire nest and place it under a split and notched piece of wood. A rock holds open the split in the cottonwood. Insert a charred cotton cloth in the notch. Use your foot to hold the sapling in place while you saw. The saw is a cottonwood throwing stick with a sharpened edge. Press down hard, get all your weight over the saw. Just before I passed out from exhaustion, there was ignition. Push the glowing char cloth into the nest. Okay, let's take a moment to review. At the beginning of the program, we said you must be mentally prepared to survive. When you can make the tools and accomplish the skills covered in this video, you will be mentally tough and mentally prepared to defeat the 7 enemies that threaten your life. Ron and Jason Sievers used the Aboriginal fire saw at Mountain Mel's Survival Skills Training Facility. Learn to return from the bush at Mel's Wilderness Survival Teepee Camp. For information on attending the camp and for a free list of Mel's favorite survival books and videos, call this number or send Mel a self-addressed stamped envelope. Check out our free internet health magazine at herbvideos.com. Be certain to make herbvideos.com your favorite place for lifestyle and health information.